They cleaned the nib of her pen on the sleeve of her dark wool dress. Marilyn Gamulfin sat beside one of the narrow windows, blue eyes dreamily staring out at the tiny fountain tinkling in a little courtyard, idly scratching the ears of a scrawny yellow cat, and apparently unaware of the hairs it shed all over her green silk dress. She and Eldrith were both Browns, but if Marilyn ever found out that Eldrith was the reason the stray cats she brought in continually disappeared, there would be trouble. They had been Browns. Sometimes it was difficult to remember they no longer were, or that she herself was no longer a Red. So much of what had marked them clearly as members of their old Ajahs remained, even now that they were openly pledged to the Black. Take the two former Greens. Coppery-skinned, swan-necked Jian Kaida wore the thinnest, most clinging silk dresses she could find, white today, and laughed that the gowns would have to do, since there was nothing available in Tarabon to catch a man's eye. Jian was from Arad Doman. Domani women were infamous for their scandalous clothes. Asni Zeramin, with her dark tilted eyes and bold nose, looked almost demure in pale gray, plainly cut and high-necked. But Leandrin had heard her regret leaving her clothes behind more than once. And as for Rihanna and Domaran, black hair with a stark white streak above her left ear framed a face with the cold, arrogant certainty only a could assume. It is done, Leandrin announced. J. Kim Karadin will move his white cloaks to the Panarch's palace and hold it for us. He does not yet know we will have guests, of course. There were a few grimaces. Changing Ajahs had certainly not altered anyone's feelings toward men who hated women who could channel. There is an interesting thing. He believed I was there to kill him for failing to kill Randall Four. That makes no sense, Asmi said, frowning. We are to bind him, control him, not kill him. She laughed suddenly, soft and low, and leaned back in her chair. If there is a way to control him, I would not mind binding him to me. He is a good-looking young man, from the little I saw. Leandrin sniffed. She had no love for him at all. Rihanna shook her head worriedly. It makes troubling sense. Our orders from the tower were clear, yet it is also clear that Karadin has others. I can only postulate dissension among the Forsaken. The Forsaken, Jian muttered, folding her arms tightly. Thin white silk molded her breasts even more revealingly. What good are promises that we will rule the world when the Great Lord returns if we are crushed between warring Forsaken first? Does anyone believe we could stand against any of them? Balefire. Asne looked around, tilted eyes challenging. Balefire will destroy even one of the Forsaken, and we have the means to produce it. One of the Turangrial they had removed from the tower, a fluted black rod a pace long, had that use. None of them knew why they had been ordered to take it, not even Leandrin herself. Too many of the Turangrial were
Hey, Nightmare, how you doing, bro?
They had been told to, with no reason.
Hope you're doing well tonight.
But some orders had to be obeyed. Leandrin wished they had been able to secure even one Angrial.
Here we go.
Jian gave a sharp sniff. If any of us could. Or have you forgotten the contest we dared nearly killed me, and burned a hole through both sides of the ship before I could stop it? Fine good it would have done us to drown before reaching Tanchico. What need have we of Balefire? Leandrin said. If we can control the Dragon Reborn, let the Forsaken think with us. She became aware of another presence in the room. The woman Gildan, wiping down a carved low-backed chair
playing some
in one
Tetris.
corner.
Hell yeah.
What are you doing here, woman? Cleaning. The dark braided woman straightened uncomfortably. You told me to clean. Leandrin almost struck out with the power. Almost. But Gildan certainly did not know they were Aes Sedai. How much had the woman heard? Nothing of importance. You will go to the cook, she said in a cold fury. and tell him he is to strap you very hard, and you are to have nothing to eat until the dust it is all gone. Again, the woman had made her speak like a commoner again. Marilyn stood, nuzzling the yellow cat's nose with hers, and handed the creature to Gildan. See that he gets a dish of cream when the cook is done with you, and some of that nice lamb. Cut it small for him. He doesn't have many teeth left, poor thing. Gildan looked at her, not blinking, and she added, Is there something you don't understand? I understand. Gildan's mouth was tight. Perhaps she did finally understand. She was a servant, not an equal. And waited a moment after she left. The cat cradled in her arms, then snatched open one of the doors. The entry hall was empty. Gildan was not eavesdropping. She did not trust the woman, but then she could not think of anyone she did trust. We must be concerned with what concerns
Let's
us,
smoke it
she
out,
said tightly, closing the door. Eldrith, have you found
White
a
gummy.
new clue in those pages? Eldrith? The plump woman
Nice
gave a start,
rechargeable.
then stared around at them, blinking. It was the first time she had raised her head from the battered yellow manuscript. She seemed surprised to see Leander. What? Clue? Oh, no. It is difficult enough getting into the king's library. If I extracted so much as a page, the librarians would know it immediately. But if I disposed of them, I would never find anything. That place is a maze. No, I found this in a bookseller's near the king's palace. It is an interesting treatise on embracing Sidar. Leandrin sent the pages.
And that's
showered
me
across
smoking
the
on it pretty much.
Unless they are a treatise
What
on
are we
the
at now?
controlling of Randall Thor,
I think it's
let them
about
be
3-4 days,
What
maybe
have you
5
learned
days.
about what we seek? Eldred
Very taking
flicked
it
the
down.
scattered papers. Well, it is in the Panarch's palace. You learned that too.
I like it. It hits
and
good.
It must be a Terangrial.
Excuse me.
To control someone who can channel must
Good
require
flavor
power.
to it.
And since it is a specialized use,
And it's
that means a Terangrial.
somewhat
You will find it
smooth.
in the
As
exhibition
long as you don't
room,
get too crazy with
or
your hits.
perhaps among the Panarch's collection. Something new, Eldred. With an oath, Leandrin made her voice less shrill. Have you found anything that is new? Anything? The round-faced woman blinked uncertainly. Actually, no. It does not matter, Marilyn said. In a few days, once they have invested their precious money, we can begin searching. Inspect every candlestick we will find.
Definitely helps out
We are
whenever
on the brink, Leandrin. We will put
when I
Randall
have roaches
Thor
in my
on a
bowl.
leash and teach him to
definitely
sit
tastes
and roll
better
over.
too.
Oh yes, Eldrith said, smiling happily. On a leash. Leandrin hoped it was so. She was tired of waiting, tired of hiding. Let the world know her. Let people bend knee as had been promised when she first forswore old oaths. Gyanin knew she was not alone as soon as she stepped into her small house by the kitchen door. But she dropped her mask and the jute bag carelessly on the table and walked over to where a bucket of water stood beside the brick fireplace. As she bent to take the copper ladle, her right hand darted into a low hollow where 2 bricks had been removed behind the bucket. She spun erect, a small crossbow in her hand. No more than a foot long, without power or range, but she always kept it drawn, and the dark sting of the sharp steel bolt would kill in a heartbeat. If the man in the corner saw the crossbow, he gave no outward sign. He was pale-haired and blue-eyed, in his middle years, and good-looking if too slender for her taste. Clearly he had watched her cross the narrow yard through the iron-grilled window beside him. Do you think that I threaten you? He said after a moment. She recognized the familiar accents of home, but she did not recognize them. Who are you? For answer, he dipped 2 fingers carefully into his belt pouch. Apparently he could see, after all, and brought out something small and flat. She motioned him to lay it on the table and back up again. When he was back in the corner, did she realize what he had said Never taking her eyes or the crossbow away from him, she lifted it up where she could see. A small ivory plaque, bordered in gold, engraved with a raven and a tongue. The raven's eyes were black sapphires. A raven, symbol of the imperial family. The Tower of Ravens, symbol of imperial justice. Normally this would be enough, she told him, but we are far from Shanshan, in a land where the bazaar is almost harmless. What other proof can you offer? Smiling with silent amusement, he removed his coat, unlaced his shirt, and stripped it off. On either shoulder was the tattoo of raven and tower. Most seekers for truth bore the ravens as well as the tower, but not even someone who dared steal a seeker's plaque would have himself marked so. To wear the ravens was to be the property of the imperial family. There was an old story of a fool young lord and lady who had themselves tattooed on the rock, some 300 years gone. When the then empress learned of it, she had them brought to the court of the 9 moons and set to scrubbing floors. This fellow might be one of their descendants. The mark of the raven was forever. My apologies, Seeker, she said, setting the crossbow down. Why are you here? She did not ask a name. Any he gave might or might not be his. He left her holding the plaque and dressed himself in a leisurely manner, a subtle reminder. She was a captain and he property, but he was also a seeker, and under the law he could have her put to the question on his own authority. By law he had the right to send her out to buy the rope to bind her while he put her to the question right here, and he would expect her to return with it. Flight from a seeker was a crime. Refusal to cooperate with a seeker was a crime. She had never in her life considered any criminal act, no more than she had considered treason against the Crystal Throne. But if he asked the wrong questions, demanded the wrong answers, the crossbow was still close to her hand, and Kantorin was far away. Wild thoughts, dangerous thoughts. I serve the High Lady Suroth and the Korena for the Empress, he said. I am checking on the progress of the agents the High Lady has placed in these lands. Checked? What ought to be checked? And by a secret? I have heard nothing of this from the courier boats. His smile deepened, and she flushed. Of course the crews would not speak of the seeker, yet he answered while lacing up his shirt. The courier boats are not to be risked with my troops. I have taken passage on the vessels of a local smuggler, a man called Baal Domar. His craft started somewhere in Tarabon and Arad she said calmly. All goes well. Now. I'm glad that you at least understood your instructions. Among the others, only the Seekers did. It is regrettable that there are not more Seekers with the Hylian. Settling his coat on his shoulders, he plucked the Seeker's plaque from her hand. There has been some embarrassment over the return of Suldam deserters. Such desertions have become common knowledge. Much better that they simply vanish. Only because she had a little time to think was she able to keep her face smooth. Suldam had been left behind in the debacle at first. Possibly some her instruction, delivered by Lady Suroth herself, had been to return any who could be found, whether they wanted to return or not, and if that was not possible, dispose of them. The last had seemed only a final alternative, until now. I regret that these lands do not know Kaf, he said, taking a seat at the table. Even in Kantorin, only the Bloods still have Kaf, or it was so when I left. Perhaps supply ships have arrived from Shanshan since. Tea must do. Fix me tea. She very nearly knocked him out of his chair. The man was property, and a seeker. She brewed tea, and served it to him, standing beside his chair with the pot to keep his cup full. She was surprised he did not ask her to don a veil and dance on the table. She was permitted to sit at last, after fetching pen and ink and paper, but only to sketch maps of Tanchico and its defenses, to draw every other city and town she knew the least thing about. She listed the various forces in the field, as much as she knew of their strengths and
Everyone's
loyalties,
doing good
what
out
she
there
had
tonight.
deduced of their dispositions.
Or daytime, depending
When
where
she
you're
was
at.
done, he stuffed it all in his pocket, told her to send the contents of the jute sack by the next courier boat, and left with one of those amused smiles, saying he might check on her progress again in a few weeks. She sat there for a long time after he was gone. Every map she had drawn, every list she had made,
Definitely gotta get a better chair.
sent out by courier boats long since. Having her do it all again while he watched.
Right now I got one of those camping chairs that had like a cup holder on it.
Death Watch guards.
But good thing about it is
Seekers rarely did.
it's a rocker, but
At least he had not
still
gone
not
down to
really the
basement
best for
before
your
she
back.
arrived.
Or on your back, should I say.
Had he just been waiting for her to speak? The
Especially when
stout
the back's
iron
almost
lock
already,
hung seemingly
it's already
undisturbed
hurting.
on the door in the hall just beyond the
Almost
kitchen.
always hurts,
But
but
it was said Seekers knew how to
there's
open
good
locks
days and there's
without a
bad
key.
days.
Taking the key from her belt
Excuse me.
pouch, she unfastened the lock and went down the narrow steps. One lamp on a shelf lit the dirt-floored basement. Just 4 brick walls, cleared of everything that might help an escape. A faint smell of the slop pail hung in the air. On the side opposite the lamp, a woman in a dirty dress sat despondently on a few rough woolen blankets, her head lifted at the sound of Egyanin's dark eyes fearful and pleading. She had been the first Suldam Egyanin had found, the first, the only. Egyanin had all but stopped looking after she found Bethamin, and Bethamin had been in this basement since, while courier boats came and went. Did anyone come down here? Egyanin said. No. I heard footsteps overhead, but no. Bethamin stretched out her hands. Please, Egyanin, this is a mistake. You have known me for 10 years. Take this thing off of me. A silver collar encircled her neck, attached by a thick silver leash to a bracelet of the same metal that hung on a peg a few feet above her head. It had been almost an accident, putting it on her, simply a means of securing her for a few moments, and then she had managed to knock Egyanin down, trying a dash for freedom. If you bring it to me, I will, Egyanin said angrily. She was angry with many things, not with Bethamin. Bring the Idam over here, and I will remove it. Bethamin shivered, let her hands fall. It is a mistake, she whispered. A horrible mistake. But she made no move toward the bracelet. Her first attempted flight had left her writhing on the floor upstairs, racked by nausea, and had left Egyanin stunned. Damani, women who could it was Damani who could channel, not Sultan. Idam could only control no other woman, and not a man. Young were executed, of course. Only a woman. A woman who had that ability and was collared could not move a few steps without her bracelet on the wrist of a Suldam to complete the link.
Hey, Running Bear, how you
Egyanin
doing?
felt very tired climbing the stairs and
Appreciate it, Running Bear.
She wanted some tea herself, but the little the Seeker had left was cold, and she did not
That was
feel
a
like
good hit.
playing music. Instead, she sat down and pulled the Idam out of the jute bag. To her it was only finely jointed silver. She could not use it, and it could not harm her unless somebody
Little
hit her.
2 gram
Even lifting
disposable,
herself with an Idam that
rechargeable
far,
also.
denying its ability
I think most of
to
the
control her,
disposable ones
left
now
her
are
to shiver down her
rechargeable
spine.
for the most part.
Women who could channel were dangerous animals rather than people. It had been they who broke the world. They must be controlled, or they would turn everyone into their property. That was what she had been taught, what had been taught in Shonshan for 1,000 years. Strange that seemed not to have happened here. No, that was a dangerous, foolish line of thought. Tucking the Idam back into the bag, she cleaned the tea things to settle her mind. She liked tidiness.
You
and
gotta
there was
get a new
small
septum ring.
satisfaction in making the kitchen so.
That's what's
Before
starting to
she
irritate
realized
already.
it, she was brewing a pot of tea for herself. She did not want to think about Bethamin, and that was dangerous.
Hey, crazy, how you doing?
Settling herself
Hope
back
you're doing
at the
good,
table,
OG
she
Smoke.
stirred honey into a cup of tea as black as she could make it. Not calf, but it
Oh, I'm
was.
not doing too bad.
Despite her denial, despite her pleas,
Just chilling,
Bethamin could channel. Could
smoking some
others
white
so?
gummy,
Was that why the High
and
Lady
listening to
Suroth
book and
was
relaxing.
left
Hope you're doing
behind
good,
Father killed?
OG.
Something. It was impossible. The yearly testings all across Shanshan found every girl who had the spark of channeling in her. Each was struck from the rolls of citizens, struck from family records,
Oh, shit.
taken away to become collared Damani. The same testings found the girl
That's
who
crazy,
began to wear
Running
the
Bear.
bracelet of the Suldam. No woman escaped being tested each year.
Oh, it's not
until
really
she
my
was old
studio.
enough
It's
that
actually
she
my
had begun
bedroom. But
channeling if the spark
the only
was
thing
there.
that's different is
How could even one girl be
my
tested
light.
for Suldam when she was
I have a
demoted?
regular light
Yet
instead of
there
a colored
Bethamin
one.
was in the basement, held by an eye
So I had a red light,
by an anchor. One thing was
but
certain.
it finally burnt
The
out. So
possibilities here were
I haven't had the money to go get
This involved
another
blood
colored one.
and
So
seekers. Maybe
I had
even
to resort to a regular
would the High
light
Lady Suroth dare keep knowledge of this sort from the Empress?
because I was probably gonna get a blue one or a green one. Because the blue one would actually make all my stuff pop out because it acts as the same as a black light.
She hoped to avoid the death of 10,000 tears.
Hey, OG, how you doing, bro? Yep, you actually made it, bro.
Like him, finding more Suldam and seeing if Idam held them. Beyond that, she was sailing uncharted reefs with
Oh, yeah,
no
OG.
linesman in the bow.
Yeah, I like this one. I guess it's okay. I've always found the different colored ones made it a little bit darker.
Not just to help the High Lady Suroth keep a secret.
They actually sell orange lights too. But no, mine was actually a red one.
But it would not go away.
But I like the colored one because they made it seem like it was darker in here. It's real bright.
Cup of wine. When Elaine came back with her things neatly bundled,
And since it was nighttime outside, I like the colored one because it made it seem darker and like, at least to me, they felt more. It was more of a relaxed type feeling with it being a little bit darker than bright like this. Because doing it with this light, at least to me, it gives it feel like I'm doing my live like during the daytime instead of doing it at nighttime like I do.
Perhaps a mile north, she could make out high, round walls, the Great Circle.
That shit nice. I just haven't decided. Well, the colored lights I get are like LED lights, so it's a little bit better than the regular ones.
It seemed almost odd to see.
I just haven't decided what color I'm gonna get. Either the red one again, the green one, or the blue one.
And even nose rings she had become used to, and the fine gold chain across each woman's dark cheek.
Like I said, the blue one, if you have like a lot of black light posters and like stuff up, a blue light would do the same thing as a black light would do, as far as making them pop out and stuff. Like how it'll probably do that to this tapestry right here. It's just that it's a lot brighter than what a black light is. The black light's real dim, but blue light's a lot brighter.
To have them transferred to another sea folk ship headed the other way.
Now I just gotta get the
at least it
extra money to go get one or two.
Elaine gave them a searching look. Sullenness meant rebellion.
Because probably all reality, I'll probably get a blue one and probably a red or a green one. So I have two different colors. I can switch it up from time to time.
And then on to Cantorin and the Isle Somira, spreading news of the Coromor, if it pleases the mind. But I must allow
Our Grateful Dead effects.
Here, or he will burst. Her husband.
Not grow lights, just regular light bulbs. Because how my other lives, how I had the red light going, that one finally burnt out. They're LED lights too, which is pretty cool. But that one finally burnt out, so I had to use a regular light bulb.
and a transparent
I gotta get the money together eventually
The veils looked ridiculous,
and get
especially on
another
men
light.
with thick mustaches.
Probably be a blue one or
The light send you a safe
a green one or red one.
said, shifting her bundles on
Just
the
I like it.
If we
I like the
discover
feeling
any
for my
danger,
nighttime
might
lives
suddenly
just because it
before
gives it
we
more of
sail, we will
a
send
dark and more relaxed
Hamid and
feeling
her
instead of
sister
being
lived
so
in
bright.
the calm. Knowledge of the Black Adja hardly fazed them.
I just haven't had the extra money for that as of yet.
Jorin kissed her fingertips.
That's why I still
and
stuck
pressed
with
them
this
to
light.
Elaine's lips. The light willing, we shall meet again. The light willing, Elaine responded, duplicating the Windfinder's gesture. It still felt odd, but it was an honor too, used only between close family
Oh, a
members.
strobe one I can't do. That's liable to make me fall out and have a fit or a seizure, should I say.
Jorin could certainly weave fire much better now. When they reached the foot of the gangplank, Nynaeve heaved a sigh.
Yeah, strobe light will that have
potion Jorin produced had
a
sent
very
them
negative
after
effect
2
on
days
me.
at sea. But all the same, she'd been tight-eyed and tight-mouthed until Tanchico came in sight. The two men bracketed them immediately.
But that's still also me being able to have extra money for something like that.
Back, and his pale, thumb-thick staff held in both hands, dark eyes.
Cause I've even been if I had the money, those how do you sell those flat like LED lights that you has a little more you can switch the color from. I would put that all up along the ceiling like that just to have that effect for when I do my lives. But that would also cost money I don't have at the moment.
She suspected any of them would have been willing to cut her throat, but hoped that a silk dress meant money in her purse. They did not frighten her.
Because the light bulbs ain't that much either.
2 or 3 of them, she was sure. But she and Nynaeve
not expensive,
had their
but
great
more than what I
serpentines in their
have.
pouches, and it would be useless to pretend no connection with the White Tower if she channeled in front of 100 men.
I get it eventually back the way it feels more comfortable to
He
me.
would not have minded having 10 more just like them.
And looks better for y'all instead of it being all bright.
One of the smaller ships. They do be you! A wide, round-faced man in a green silk coat leaped onto the dock,
Yeah.
ignoring Julian's raised
Yeah, I've
staff
seen him,
to
OG.
stare at her and Nynaeve. A beard with no mustache marked him as an Illianer, and so did his accent. He seemed vaguely familiar.
Yeah, the LED strips that you can put on, like, they're made mainly for like display cases or other things. Because you can just lay them down like double stick tape down the whole area you want. Plug it in, and it has a little remote where you can switch the lights to where they'll fade in and out. They're pretty cool lights. Just I ain't got the funds for that yet.
Said he had done well since. A pleasure to see you again, Nynaeve said coolly. But if you will excuse us, we must find rooms in the city. That will be hard. Tanchico do burst its caulking. I do know a place where my word may bring something, though. I could no remain longer in Falma, but I do feel I owe you some debt. Domon paused, frowning with sudden unease. Your being here. Will the same happen here as in Falma, then? No, Master Domon, Elaine said, when Nynaeve hesitated. Of course not, and we will be glad to accept your help. She half expected some protest out of Nynaeve. The older woman only nodded thoughtfully and made introductions among the men. Tom's cloak made Domon's eyebrows rise. For an instant, she almost thought it looked as though he recognized the Gleeman. But Julian's tyrant garb brought a frown that was returned in
I don't know about all that alien stuff. I had to deal with a lot of that just growing up in Roswell. That's supposedly where the UFO crashed back in the day.
Domon talked of what
that every year they have annual alien convention.
And he had indeed done well. A dozen good coasting ships the Panarchs taxed
Thanks,
he laughed.
running birds.
And for deep water, they do
getting a little longer.
He could hardly have acquired so many honestly in so short a time.
Not so
It shocked
much
her to hear him
thickness
speak
on the
so
top,
openly
but
on a dock full of men.
there's also tattoos up on the
I
top of my
don't
head.
smuggle and make such profits as I did never believe. A tenth the amount
Definitely
of
thinking
excise
twice
and
about
customs
growing
men's
it out like
pockets
this, just
who
from
turn their eyes and seal
yeah,
their
because
mouths.
the springs hit, then
2 tan chickens in those
it's gonna be
veils
summer,
and
then I'm
round
gonna be stuck
hats
with all
spoke
this hair
fast,
and like
hands
triple digit
clasped
weather.
behind their backs. Each wore a heavy brass key dangling from a thick chain about his neck. It had the look of a mark of office. They nodded to Doman in a familiar way. Tom looked
Even
amused, but Julian
in Roswell,
glared at
even
Doman and the 2 tan
one of the
chickens.
McDonald's in Roswell
As
is
a
in the
thief catcher, he
shape
had a
of a
proper dislike
UFO,
of those who flouted the law. I do not believe
which
it
is
will
crazy.
last much longer, though. Doman
They
said
have
when the 10 chickens had passed.
that little
Things
like
do be
alien
even worse in
museum you
our
could take a
Doman
little
than
walk
here,
through.
and it do be bad enough here.
The
Perhaps
street
the Lord
lights
Dragon does
are
not
like
break the world yet,
domed out
but
with
he
like
did
eyes
break
on it
out
to
of
look like
Doman
alien
and
heads.
Elaine
Yeah, it
wanted
gets
to say
crazy
something
there.
sharp to him, but they had reached the foot of the dock, and she watched in silence while he hired sedan chairs and bearers and a dozen men with stout staves and hard faces. Guards with swords and spears stood at the end of the dock, with the look of hired men, not soldiers. From across the wide street along the row of docks, hundreds of defeated, sunken faces stared at the guards. Sometimes eyes flickered toward the ships, but mainly they fixed on the men, holding them back from those ships. Remembering what Coeen had said about people
There's
here
even
robbing her
people
vessel,
that
desperate to buy passage
sell
anywhere
dirt
away from Tanchico,
from
Elaine
the
shivered.
farm
When
where
these
the
hungry eyes
the
looked
spaceship's
at the
supposed to
ships,
be crashed.
the mood burned in
They'll
them.
like bag it up or
Elaine sat
jar up the
rigidly
dirt
in her
and
chair as it
sell it to
danced through the
tourists there.
crowds behind prodding staves, and tried not to look at anything. She did not want to see those faces. Where was their king? Why was he not taking care of them?
Shit, midnight and 5,
A
huh?
sign above the gate of the white-plastered inn Doman took them to, below the great circle, proclaimed the Three-Plum Court. The only court Elaine saw was the high-walled courtyard,
And 5 would
paved
be
with
1
flagstones
in the
in
morning.
front of the inn, which
At
was
least
3
here it will
square
be.
stories with no windows near the ground, and the upper windows grilled with fanciful ironwork. Inside, men and women crowded the common room, most in Tanchican clothes, and the buzz of voices nearly drowned out the tune of a hammered dulcimer. Nynaeve gasped at her first sight of the innkeeper, a pretty woman not much older than herself, with brown eyes and pale honey braids, her veil not hiding a plump rosebud at the mouth. Elaine made a sound, but it was not Leandra. The woman obviously knew Doman well. Smiles for Elaine and Nynaeve, making much over Tom being a glee man, on her last 2 rooms, Elaine suspected might be less than the going rate. Elaine made sure she and Nynaeve got the one with the larger bed. She had seen Nynaeve before, and the woman was friendly. Rendra also provided supper in a private room, laid out by 2 veiled young serving men. Elaine found herself staring at a plate of a roast lamb with spiced apple jelly and some sort of long yellowish beans prepared with pine nuts. She could not touch it. All those hungry faces. Doman ate enough. Him and his smuggling and his gold. Tom and Julian showed no reticence either. Rendra, Nynaeve said quietly.
Damn, that's a good question, OG.
I can lay my hands on a good bit of gold if it would help. You could donate to Baal's kitchen, the innkeeper replied, giving Doman a smile. The man avoids all of the taxes, yet he taxes himself. For each crown he gives as the bribe, he gives 2 for the soup. He has even talked about saving, and I pay my taxes.
I'd have to think
Less
about
than
that.
taxes, Doman muttered, hunching his shoulders defensively. I do make a very healthy profit. Fortune prick me if I do know. It is good that you like to help people, Master Doman, Nynaeve said, when Rendra and the servants had gone. Tom and Julian both got up to see they really had gone. With a half bow, Tom let Julian open the door. The hall outside was empty. Nynaeve went right on. We may need your help. The Illianers his knife and fork paused in cutting a piece of lamb. How? He asked suspiciously. I do not know exactly, Master Doman. You have ships, you must have men. We may need ears and eyes. Some of the Black Aja may very well be in Tanchico, and we must find them if they are. Nynaeve lifted a fork
Might have to go back
to her mouth, as if she had said nothing out of the ordinary.
Talk to myself out of doing stupid shit.
Black Aja of late. Doman gaped at her, then stared incredulously at Tom and Julian as they settled back in their chairs. When they nodded, he pushed his plate aside and put his head down on his arms. He very nearly earned himself a thump from Nynaeve, if the way her mouth tightened was any indication, and Elaine would not have blamed her. Why should he need them to confirm her word? Finally, Doman roused himself. It do be going to happen again. Falma all over. Maybe it do be time for me to pack up and go. If I do take the ships I have back to Ilion, I will be a wealthy man there, too. I doubt you'd find Ilion, Nynaeve told him in a firm voice. I understand that some
go back in time to where I go experience Woodstock.
You might not enjoy your wealth under one of the Forsaken. Doman's eyes nearly came out of his head, but she went right on. There are no safe places any longer. You can run like a rabbit, but you cannot hide. Is it not better to do what you can to fight back like a man?
Just before the gold rush.
Nynaeve was being too hard. She always had to bully people. Elaine smiled and leaned over to put a hand on Doman's arm. We do not mean to browbeat you, Master Doman, but we truly may need your help. I know you for a brave man, else you would not have waited for us as long as you did at Falma. We will be most grateful. You do this very well, Doman muttered. One with an ox driver's stick, the other with a queen's honey. Oh, very well. I will help as I can, but I will no promise to remain for another Falma. Tom and Julian set in to question him closely about Tanchico as they ate. At least, Julian did in a roundabout manner, suggesting questions to Tom about what districts thieves and cut-purses and burglars frequented, what wine shops they used, and who bought their stolen goods. The thief-catcher maintained that such people often knew more about
nightmare.
the city than the authorities did. He did not seem to want to talk to the Ileana directly, and Doman
I remember playing
every time
Tetris
he
on
answered one of the tyrant's
original
questions
Game
put by
Boy.
Tom. He
That's
did
the
not
game that
answer
came with the
until they
game.
were put by Tom. Tom's own questions made no sense, at least not coming from a gleeman. He asked of nobles and factions, of who was allied to whom and who opposed, of who had what stated aims and what their actions brought about, and whether the results were different from what they supposedly wanted. Not the kind of questions
Because
she
that
expected
game
from him
definitely
at all,
gets frustrating
even
like
after
that.
all their conversations on Wave Dancer. He'd been willing enough to talk with her.
Oh, he's playing some
even seemed
Tetris
to enjoy
OG.
it, but somehow every time she thought she might dig out something about his past, that was just when he managed to put her back up and send her stalking away. Doman answered Tom with more alacrity than he did Julian. In either case, though, he seemed to know Tanchico very well, both its lords and officials, and its dark underbelly. As he talked, it often sounded as if there were little difference. Once the two men had wrung the smuggler dry, Nynaeve summoned
it doesn't start off hard,
and
but it definitely gets hard.
each of the Black Sisters. Holding the sheets gingerly
Mainly
in
because it
one
gets faster.
hand, Doman frowned at them uneasily, as though they were the women themselves, but he promised to let the men as were in port keep their eyes open. When Nynaeve reminded him that they should all take extreme care, he laughed, the way he would had she told him not to run himself with a sword. Julian left on Doman's heels, twirling his pale staff and saying night was the best time to find thieves and people who lived off thieves. Nynaeve announced she was retiring to her room, to lie down a while. She looked a bit unsteady, and suddenly Elaine realized why. Nynaeve had become used to Wave Dancer's heaving. Now she was having trouble with the ground not heaving. The woman's stomach was not a pleasant traveling companion. She herself followed Tom down to the common room, where he had promised Rendra he would perform. For a wonder, she found a bench at an empty table, and cool looks sufficed to ward off the men who suddenly seemed to want to sit there. Rendra brought her a silver cup of wine, and she sipped as she listened to Tom play his harp, singing love songs like The First Rose of Summer and The Wind That Shakes the Willow, and funny songs like Only One Boot and The Old Grey Goose. His listeners were appreciative, slapping the tables for applause. After a while, Elaine slapped hers, too. She had not drunk more than half her wine, but a handsome young serving man smiled at her and filled it up. It was all strangely exciting. In her whole life, she had not been in an inn's common room half a dozen times, and never to sip wine and be entertained like one of the common people. Flourishing his cloak to set the multi-hued patches fluttering, stories, Mara and the Three Foolish Kings, and several tales about Anla, the wise counselor, and recited a long stretch of the great hunt of the Horn, reciting it so that horses seemed to prance and trumpets blare in the common room, and men and women fought and loved and died. On into the night he sang and recited, only pausing now and then to wet his throat with a sip of wine, as the patrons eagerly clamored for more. The woman who had been playing the dulcimer sat in a corner with her instrument on her knees and a sour expression on her face. People often tossed coins to Tom. He had enlisted a small boy to gather them up, and it was unlikely they had produced as much for her music. It all seemed to suit Tom, the harp, and especially the recital. Well, he was a glee man, but it seemed more than that. Elaine could have sworn she had heard him recite the great hunt before, but in high chant, not plain. How could that be? He was just a simple old glee man. Finally, in the deep hours of the night, Tom bowed with a last sweeping flourish of his cloak and headed for the stairs amid great slapping of tables. Elaine slapped hers as vigorously as anyone. Rising to follow, she slipped and sat back down hard, frowning at her silver wine cup. It was full. Surely she had drunk a little. She felt dizzy for some reason. Yes, that sweet young man with those melting brown eyes had refilled her cup. How many times? Not that it mattered. She never drank more than one cup of wine. Never. It was being off-wave dancer and back on dry land. She was reacting like Nynaeve. That was all. Getting carefully to her feet, and refusing the sweet young man's most solicitous offer of help, she managed to climb the stairs despite the way they swayed. Not stopping at the second floor where her and Nynaeve's room was, she went up to the third and knocked on the door. He opened it slowly, peering out suspiciously. He seemed to have a knife in his hand, and then it was gone. She seized one of his long white mustaches. "I remember," she said. Her tongue did not seem to be working properly. The words sounded fuzzy. "I was sitting on your knee, and I pulled your mustache." She gave it a yank to demonstrate, and he winced. "And my mother leaned over your shoulder and laughed at me." "I think it's best you go to your room," he said, trying to pry her hand free. "I think you need some sleep." She refused to let go. In fact, she seemed to have pushed him back into his room by his mustache. "My mother sat on your knee, too. I saw it. I remember. Sleep is the thing, Elaine. You will feel better in the morning." He managed to get her hand loose and tried ushering her to the door, but she slipped around him. The bed had no posts. If she had a bedpost to hold on to, perhaps the room would stop tilting back and forth. "I want to know why Mother sat on your knee." He stepped back, and she realized she was reaching for his mustache again. "You're a glee man. My mother would not sit on a glee man's knee." "Go to bed, child." "I'm not a child." She stamped her foot angrily and almost fell. The floor was lower than it looked. "Not a child. You will tell me. Now." Tom sighed and shook his head. At last he said stiffly, "I always a glee man. I was a bard, a court bard. In Camelin, as it happens, for Queen Morgaze. You were a child. You are just remembering things wrong, that's all. You were her lover, weren't you? The flinch of his eyes was enough. You were. I always knew about Gareth Bryn. At least I figured it out. But I always hoped she would marry me. Gareth Bryn and you and this Lord Gabriel Matt said she looks calf eyes at now. And how many more? How many? What makes her any different from Berylane, tripping every man who catches her eye into her bed? She is no different. Her vision shivered, and her head rang. It took her a moment to realize he had slapped her. Slapped her? She drew herself up, wishing he would not sway. How dare you? I am Dottery of Andor, and I will not be... You are a little girl with a skinful of wine throwing a temper tantrum, he snapped. And if I ever hear you say anything like that about Morgaze again, drunk or sober, I'll put you over my knee, however you channel. Morgaze is a fine woman, as good as any there is. Is she? Her voice quavered, and she realized she was crying. Why did she? Why? Somehow she had her face buried against his coat, and he was smoothing her hair. Because it is lonely being a queen, he said softly. Because most men attracted to a queen see power, not a woman. I saw a woman, and she knew it. I suppose Bryn saw the same in her, and this is Gabriel too. You have to understand, child. Everyone wants someone in their life. Someone who cares for them. Someone they can care for. Even a queen. Go away, she mumbled into his ear. You made me laugh. I remember that. You made her laugh too. And you rode me on your shoulder. A long story. He sighed painfully. I will tell you another time, if you ask. With luck, you'll forget this by morning. It's time for you to go to bed, Elaine. He guided her to the door, and she took the opportunity to tug at his mustache again. Like that, she said with satisfaction. I used to pull it just like that. Yes, you did. You make it downstairs by yourself? Of course I can. She gave him the haughtiest stare, but he looked readier than ever to follow her into the hall. To prove there was no need, she walked, carefully, as far as the head of the stairs. He was still frowning at her worriedly from the doorway when she started down. Luckily, she did not stumble until she was out of his sight, but she did walk right by her door and had to come back. Something must have been wrong with that apple jelly. She knew she should not have eaten so much of it. Lini always said she could not remember what it was Lini said, but something about eating too many sweets. There were 2 lamps burning in the room, one on the small round table by the bed, and the other on the white plastered mantel above the brick fireplace. Nynaeve lay stretched out on the bed atop the coverlet, fully dressed. Her elbows stuck out, Elaine noted. She said the first thing that came into her head. Friends must think I'm crazy. Tom is a bard, and Berylane isn't my mother after all. Nynaeve gave her the oddest look. I'm a little dizzy for some reason. A nice boy with sweet brown eyes offered to help me upstairs. I will wager he did, Nynaeve said, biting off each word. Rising, she came with her arm around Elaine's shoulders. Come over here a moment. There's something I think you should see. It appeared to be a bucket of extra water by the washstand. Here, we'll both kneel down so you can look. Elaine did, but there was nothing in the bucket but her own reflection in the water. She wondered why she was grinning that way. Then Nynaeve's hand went to the back of her neck, and her head was in the water. Flailing her hands, she tried to straighten up, but Nynaeve's arm was like an iron bar. You were supposed to hold your breath underwater. Elaine knew you were. She just could not remember how. All she could do was flail and gurgle and choke. Nynaeve hauled her up, water streaming down her face, and she filled her lungs. "How dare you?" she gasped. "I am the daughter heir of—" She managed to get out one wail before her head went back in with a splash. Seizing the bucket with both hands and pushing did no good. Drumming her feet on the floor did no good. She was going to drown. Nynaeve was going to drown. After an age, she was back out in the air again. Sodden strands of hair hung all across her face. "I think," she said, in the steadiest voice she could find, "that I am going to sit up." Nynaeve got the big white glazed basin down from the washstand just in time and held Elaine's head while she brought up everything she had ever eaten in her life. A year later, well, hours anyway, it seemed that long, Nynaeve was washing her face and wiping her mouth, bathing her hands and wrists. There was nothing solicitous in her voice, though. "How could you do this? Whatever possessed you? I might expect a fool man to drink until he can't stand, but you! And tonight!" "I only had one cup," Elaine muttered. Even with that young man refilling it, she could not two. Surely not. "A cup the size of a pitcher," Nynaeve sniffed, helping her to her feet. Appalling her, really. "Can you stay awake? I am going to look for Egwene, and I still don't trust myself to get out of Tel Riyadh without someone to wake me." They had looked for Egwene unsuccessfully every night since she had disappeared so abruptly out of that meeting in the heart of the stone. "Stay awake? Nynaeve, it is my turn to look, and better it's me. You know you cannot channel unless you are angry, and—" She realized the other woman was surrounded by the glow of saidar, and had been for some time, she thought. Her own head felt stuffed full of wool. Thought had to burrow through. She could barely sense the true source. "Maybe you had better go. I will stay awake." Nynaeve frowned at her, but finally nodded. Elaine tried to help undress her, but her fingers did not seem to work very well when it came to those little buttons. Grumping under her breath, Nynaeve managed on her own. In only her shift, she threaded the twisted stone ring onto the leather cord she wore hanging around her neck, alongside a man's ring, heavy and golden. That was Lan's ring. Nynaeve always wore it between her breasts. Elaine pulled the low wooden stool over beside the bed while Nynaeve stretched out again.
Hey, Mad Max, how you doing, bro? Hope you're doing well.
Asleep sitting on that. The problem seemed to be not falling on the floor. "I'll judge an hour and wait." Nynaeve
just chilling here
nodded,
smoking
then
some
closed her eyes. Both hands clutched
white
around
gummy.
the two rings. After a time, her breathing deepened.
Oh yeah, appreciate
The
it,
heart of
Mad
the stone
Max. Hope
was
you have a
quite
great
empty.
night too.
Peering into the dimness among the great columns, Nynaeve had circled Kalendor sparkling out of the floor stones completely before she realized she was still in her shift, the leather cord dangling about her neck with the two rings. She frowned, and after a moment she was wearing a Two Rivers dress of good brown wool and stout shoes. Elaine and Egwene both seemed to find this sort of thing easy, but it was not easy for her. There had been embarrassing moments in earlier visits to Tel Riyadh, mostly after stray thoughts of Lan, but changing her garb deliberately took concentration. Just that, remembering, and her dress was silk, and as transparent as Rendra's veil.
Hell yeah.
Berylane would have
I'm broke
blushed.
too, mate. I got this because my brother ended up buying a couple of them.
It took an effort.
But we had a deal on them, so they're only
Worse,
$30
her
a
anger
piece
had
for a 2-gram one.
Fool girl. Did she not realize what happened when you drank too much wine? Had she never been alone in the common room before? She had not. And the true source might as well not exist so far as she was concerned.
Oh
Perhaps
shit.
it would not matter. Uneasy, she stared into the forest of huge red stone columns, turning in one spot.
Is that a good place, Mad Max?
Leave here abruptly. The stone was silent, with a hollow emptiness. She could hear the blood rushing in her own ears. Yet the skin between her shoulder blades prickled as if someone were watching her. "Egwene!" Her shout echoed in the silence among the columns.
Well, this is
Nothing. Rubbing her hands on her skirt, she found she was holding
I think I have the
a
box
stick,
still.
a thick knob on the end. A fat lot of good that would do. But she tightened her grip on it. A sword might be more use. For an instant the stick flickered, half a sword. But she did not know how to use a sword. She laughed to herself ruefully. A cudgel was as good as a sword here, both practically useless. Channeling was the only real defense, that and running, which left her only one choice at the moment. She wanted to run with a field of eyes on her, but she would not give up so quickly. Only what was she to do? Egwene was not here. She was somewhere in the waste. Roidion, Elaine said, wherever that was. Between one step and the next, she was suddenly on a mountainside with a harsh sun rising over more jagged mountains beyond the valley below.
I like it. It's good. This one's got a good flavor to it.
She was in the waste. For a moment, the sun startled her, but the waste was far enough east for sunrise there to still be night in Tanchico. In Tel Riyadh, it made no difference anyway. Sunlight or darkness there seemed to bear no relation to what was in the real world as far as she could determine. Long pale shadows still covered almost half the valley, but strangely a mass of fog billowed down there, not seeming to grow less for the sun beating on it. Great towers rose out of the fog, some appearing unfinished. A city in the place. Squinting, she could make out down the valley, too. A man, though all she could see was someone who seemed to be wearing breeches and a bright blue coat. Certainly not. He was walking along the edge of the fog, every now and again stopping to poke at it. She could not be sure, but she thought his hand stopped short each time. Maybe it was not fog at all. You must get away from here, a woman's voice said urgently. If that one sees you, you are dead, or worse. Nynaeve jumped, spinning with her club raised, nearly slipping down the slope. The woman standing a little above her wore a short white coat and voluminous pale yellow trousers gathered above short boots. Her cloak billowed on an arid gust of wind. It was her long golden hair, intricately braided, and the silver bow in her hands that made a name pop incredulously into Nynaeve's mouth. Birgitte? Birgitte, hero of 100 tales, and a silver bow with which she never missed. Birgitte, one of the dead heroes the Horn of Valir would call back from the grave to fight in the last battle. It's impossible. Who are you? There is no time, woman. You must go before he sees. In one smooth motion, she pulled the silver arrow from the quiver at her waist, knocked it, and drew fletching to ear. The silver arrowhead pointed straight at Nynaeve's heart. Go! Nynaeve fled. She was not sure how, but she was standing on the green in Emond's Field, looking at the Wine-Spring Inn with its chimneys and red tile roof. Thatched roofs surrounded the green, where the wine-spring gushed out of a stone outcrop. The sun was high here, though the two rivers lay far west of the waste. Yet, despite a cloudless sky, a deep shadow lay across the village. She had only a moment to wonder how they were doing without her. A flicker of movement caught her eye, a flash of silver, and a woman ducking behind the corner of Iris Candrin's neat house beyond the wine-spring water. Birgitte. Nynaeve did not hesitate. She ran for one of the footbridges across the narrow rushing stream. Her shoes pounded on the wooden planks. Come back here, she shouted. You come back here and answer me. Who was that? Come back here or I'll hero you. I'll thump you so you think you have an adventure. Rounding Iris's house, she really only half expected to see Birgitte. What she did not expect at all was a man in a dark coat, trotting toward her less than 100 paces down the hard-packed dirt street. Her breath caught. Lan. But he had the same shape, the same eyes. Halting, he raised his bow and shot. At her, screaming, she threw herself aside, trying to claw her way awake. Elaine jumped to her feet, toppling the stool over backward as Nynaeve screamed and sat up on the bed, eyes wide. What happened, Nynaeve? What happened? Nynaeve shuddered. He looked like Lan. He looked like Lan, and he tried to kill me. She put a trembling hand to her left arm, where a shallow slash oozed blood a few inches below her shoulder. If I hadn't jumped, it would have gone through my heart. Seating herself on the edge of the bed, Elaine examined the cut. It is not bad. I'll wash and bandage it for you. She wished she knew how to heal. Trying without knowing might well make it worse, but it really was little more than a long nick. Not to mention that her head still seemed full of jelly. Quivering jelly. It was not Lan. Calm yourself. Whoever it was not Lan. I know that, Nynaeve said acidly. She recounted what had happened in much the same angry voice. The man who had shot at her in Emmons Field and the man in the waist. She was not sure they were one and the same. Birgitta herself was incredible enough. Are you certain? Elaine asked. Nynaeve said, the only thing I am certain of is that I did not find it.
Hey, Bastion, how you doing, bro?
Going back there tonight.
Still toking on this, bro.
Where is she?
It's only gone down about that much.
If she met that fellow with the bow. Right.
How you doing, Bastion?
Elaine had to think.
Hope you're doing good.
She wanted to sleep so badly, and her thoughts kept shimmering. She said she might not be there when we are supposed to meet again. Maybe that is why she left so hurriedly. Why ever she can't. I mean, it did not seem to make a great deal of sense, but she could not get it out properly. I hope so, Nynaeve said wearily. Looking at Elaine, she added, we had better get you to bed. You look ready to fall over. Elaine was grateful to be helped out of her clothes. She did remember to bandage Nynaeve's arm, but the bed looked so inviting she could hardly think of anything else. In the morning, perhaps the room would have stopped its slow spin around the bed. Sleep came as soon as her head touched the pillow. In the morning, she wished she were dead. With sunlight barely in the sky.
Nice, Bastion. That's badass.
Head in her hands, she
even more reason to do some dabs and celebrate.
Before going off to find the innkeeper. Every time she breathed, she could smell it. Her nose tried to clench. Her head felt. It was not possible to describe how her head felt. Had someone offered to cut it off, she might have thanked him. Are you all right? She jerked at the sound of Tom's voice and barely stifled a whimper. I am quite all right, thank you. Talking made her head throb. He fiddled with one of his mustaches uncertainly. Your stories were wonderful last night, Tom. What I remember of them? Somehow she managed a small, self-deprecating laugh. I am afraid I don't remember very much of anything except sitting there listening. I seem to have eaten some bad apple jelly. She was not about to admit to drinking all that wine. She still had no idea how much, or to making a fool of herself in his room. Above all, not that. He seemed to believe her, from the relieved way he took a chair. Nynaeve appeared, handing her a damp cloth as she sat down. She also put a horrible brew. Elaine pressed the cloth to her forehead. Have either of you seen that? The older woman asked.
Yeah, me and my brother actually watched that movie a couple days ago. That movie's it's definitely a good one.
Came in through the front door, his face weary and his snug-fitting coat rumpled. There was a bruise beneath his left eye.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one. I think you might enjoy it.
Lay flat on his head, looked rough-combed with his fingers, but he smiled as he joined them. The thieves in this city are as numerous as minnows in leaves, and they will talk to you if you buy a cup of something.
Right.
I have talked with two men.
It's a trip how she sends her phone down.
The white streak in her hair above the left ear. I think I believe one of them. So they are here. Elaine
Now, what's
said.
fucked up is
But
them
Naomi
dudes saw him
shook
up there and they went and jacked her car.
More than
That's
one
fucked
woman
up
with
there.
a white streak in her hair. He could not say how old she was, Julian said, hiding a yawn behind his hand. No age at all, he claimed. He joked that maybe she was Aes Sedai. You go too fast, Nynaeve told him in a tight voice. You do us no good if you bring them down on us. Julian flushed darkly. I am careful. I have no wish for Liandrin to put her hands on me again. I do not ask questions. I talk. Sometimes of women I used to know. 2 men bit on that white streak, and neither ever knew it was more than a scrap of idle talk.
Right, it's definitely a good one, though.
Tonight, maybe another will swim into my net. Only this time, maybe it will be a fragile woman from Kyrian with very big blue eyes. That would be Tamela Kinderode. Bit by bit, I will narrow where they have been seen until I know where they are.
It's one that I could definitely see myself watching again.
Tom sounded as if he thought that.
Because a lot of them I'll watch, they'll be alright, but I usually won't watch them again. But that one, I can actually see myself watching another time.
Doing what he usually does not, and he will draw me to them. The 2 men eyed one another. In another moment, Elaine expected one of them to offer to wrestle. Men. First Julian and Domon, now Julian and Tom. Very likely Tom and Domon would get in a fist fight to complete it. Men. That was the only comment she could think of. Perhaps Elaine and I will succeed without either of you, Nynaeve said dryly. We will begin looking ourselves today. Her eyes barely shifted toward Elaine. At least, I will. Elaine may need a little more rest to recover from the voyage. Setting the cloth down carefully, Elaine used both hands to pick up the cup in front of her. The thick, gray-green liquid tasted worse than it smelled. Shuddering, she made herself keep swallowing. When it hit her stomach, for an instant she felt like a cloak flapping in a high wind. 2 pairs of eyes can see better than 1, she told Nynaeve, setting the emerald down with a clink. 100 pairs can see even better, Julian said hastily. And if that Ilianer eel truly senses people out, we will have at least that many, what with the thieves and cut purses. We will find these women for you if they can be found, Tom said. There is no need for you to stir from the inn. This city has a dangerous feel, even if Liandrin is not here. Besides which, Julian added, if they are here, they know the 2 of you, they know your faces. Much better if you stay here at the inn, out of sight. Elaine stared at them in amazement. A moment gone, they had been trying to stare each other down. Now they were shoulder to shoulder. Nynaeve had been right about them causing trouble. Well, the daughter heir of Andor was not about to hide behind Master Julian Sandar and Master Tom Merrilin. She opened her mouth to tell them so, but Nynaeve spoke first. You are right, she said calmly. Elaine stared at her incredulously. Tom and Julian looked surprised, and at the same time disgustingly satisfied. They do know us, Nynaeve went on. I took care of that this morning, I think. Here is Mistress Rendra with our breakfast. Tom and Julian exchanged disconcerted frowns, but they could say nothing with the innkeeper smiling at them all through her veil. About what I asked you, Nynaeve said to her as the woman placed a bowl of honeyed porridge in front of her. Ah, yes, it will be no problem to find the clothes to fit both of you, and the hair. You have such lovely hair, so long. It will be the work of no time to put it up. She fingered her own deep golden braids. Tom's and Julian's faces made Elaine smile. They might have been red. They had no defense against being ignored. Her head was actually feeling a little better. Nynaeve's vile mixture seemed to be working. As Nynaeve and Rendra discussed costs and cut and fabric, Rendra wanted to duplicate her clinging dress, pale green today. Nynaeve was opposed, but seemed to be wavering. Elaine took a spoon of porridge to wash the taste from her mouth. It reminded her that she was hungry. There was one problem none of them had mentioned yet, one that Tom and Jewelin did not know. If the Black Ajah was in Tanchico, then so was whatever it was that endangered Rand. Something able to bind him with his own power. Finding Liandrin and the others was not enough. They had to find that, too. Suddenly, her newfound appetite was completely gone.
Chapter 40. Hunter of Trollocs. Remnants of the early morning rain still dripped from the leaves of the apple trees, and a purple finch hopped along a limb where fruit was forming that would not be harvested this year. The sun was well up, but hidden behind thick gray clouds. Seated cross-legged on the ground, Baron unconsciously tested his bowstring. The tightly wrapped, waxed cords had a tendency to go slack, and the storm Baron had called up to hide them from pursuit the night of the rescue had surprised even her with its ferocity. Beating rains had come 3 more times in the 6 days since. He believed it was 6 days. He had not really thought since that night, only drifted as events took him, reacting to what presented itself. The flat of his axe blade dug into his side, but he hardly noticed. Low, grassy mounds marked generations of Aybaras buried here. The oldest among the carved wooden headpieces, cracked and barely legible, bore dates nearly 300 years old, over graves indistinguishable from undisturbed ground. It was the mounds smoothed by rains but barely covered by grass that stabbed him. Generations of Aybaras buried here, but surely never 14 at one time. Aunt Nian over by Uncle Carlin's older grave, with their 2 children beside her. Great Aunt Ilsen in the row with Uncle Elward and Aunt Magda, and their 3 children, the long row with his mother and his father. Adora, Dizelle, and little Pate. A long row of mounds with bare, wet earth still showing through the grass. He counted the arrows remaining in his quiver by touch. 17. Too many had been damaged, worth recovering only for the steel arrowheads. No time to make his own. He would have to see the Fletcher in Emmons Field soon. Boole Daughtry made good arrows, even better than Tam. A faint rustle behind his back made him sniff the air. "What is it, Daniel?" he said without looking around. There was a catch of breath, a moment of startled surprise, but Daniel Lewin said, "The lady is here, Parent." None of them had gotten used to him knowing who was who before he saw them, or in the dark. But he no longer cared what they found strange. He frowned over his shoulder. Daniel looked leaner than he had. Farmers could only feed so many at once, and food had been feast or famine as the hunting went. Mostly famine. The lady? The Lady Fail. And Lord Luke, too. They came from Emmons Field. Perrin rose smoothly, taking long strides that made Daniel hurry to keep up. He managed not to look at the house, the charred timbers and sooty chimneys that had been the house where he grew up. He did scan the trees for his lookouts, those nearest the farm. Close to the waterwood as it was, the land had plenty of tall oak and hemlock, and good-sized ash and bay. Thick foliage hid the lads well. Drab farm clothes made for good hiding. So even he had difficulty picking them out. He would have to talk with those farther out. They were supposed to see that no one came close without a warning. Even Fail and this Luke. The camp, in a large thicket where he had once pretended to be in a far wilderness, was a rough place with blankets strung between trees to make shelters, more scattered on the ground between the small cook fires. The branches dripped here too. Most of the nearly 50 men in the camp, all young, were unshaven, either an imitation of Perrin or because it was unpleasant shaving in cold water. They were good hunters. He had sent home many who were not, but unaccustomed to more than a night or 2 outdoors at a time, and not used to what he had them doing either. Right then, they were standing around, gaping at Fail and Luke, and only 4 or 5 had longbow in hand. The rest of the bows lay with the bedding, and the quivers too, more often than not. Luke stood idly flipping the reins of a tall black stallion, the very pose of indolent, red-coated arrogance, cold blue eyes ignoring the men around him. The man's smell stood out among the others, cold and separate too, almost as if he had nothing in common with the men around him, not even humanity. Fail came hurrying to meet Perrin with a smile, her narrow divided skirts making a soft whisk-whisk as gray silk brushed silk.
Excuse me.
She smelled faintly of sweet herbal soap. Master Luhan said we might find you here. He meant to demand what she was doing there, but found himself putting his arms around her and saying into her hair, "It's good to see you. I've missed you." She pushed back enough to look up at him. "You look tired." He ignored that. He had no time to be tired. "You got everyone safely to Women's Field?" "They're at the Wine Spring Inn." She grinned suddenly. "Master Alvier found an old halberd and says if the White Cloaks want them, they will have to go through him. Everyone's in the village now, Perrin. Baron and Alana, the warders. Pretending to be someone else, of course, and loyal. He certainly created a sensation. Even more than Bane and Chiat." The grin faded into a frown. "He asked me to deliver a message to you. Alana vanished twice without a word, once alone. Loyal said Ivan seemed surprised to find her gone. He said I wasn't to let anyone else know." She studied his face. "What does it mean, Perrin?" "Nothing, maybe. Just that I can't be sure I can trust her. Baron warned me against her, but can I trust Baron? You say Bane and Chiat are in Emond's Field? I suppose that means he knows about them." He jerked his head toward Luke. A few of the men had approached him, asking diffident questions, and he was answering with a condescending smile. "They came with us," she said slowly. "They are scouting around your camp now. I do not think they have a very high opinion of your sentries. Perrin, why didn't you want Luke to know about the Aiel? I've talked to a number of people who were burned out." Luke was too far to overhear, but he held his voice low. "Counting Flan Lewin's place, Luke was at 5 on the day they were attacked, or the day before. Perrin, the man's an arrogant fool in some ways. I hear he's hinted at a claim to one of the Borderland thrones, for all he's told us he's from Murandy. But you cannot really believe he is a Darkling. He gave some very good advice in Emond's Field. When I said everyone was there, I meant everyone." She shook her dark head wonderingly. "Hundreds and hundreds of people have come in from north and south, from every direction, with their cattle and their sheep, all talking of Perrin Golden Eyes' warnings. Your little village is preparing to defend itself if need be. And Luke has been everywhere the last days." "Perrin, who?" he gasped, wincing. Trying to change the subject, he said, "From the south? But this is as far south as I've gone. I haven't talked to a farmer more than a mile below the Wine Spring water." Fael tugged at his beard with a laugh. "News spreads, my fine general. I think half of them expect you to form them into an army and chase the Trollocs all the way back to the Great Blight. There will be stories about you in the Two Rivers for the next 1,000 years. Perrin Golden Eyes, hunter of Trollocs. Light," he muttered. "Hunter of Trollocs." There had been little so far to justify that. 2 days after freeing Mistress Luhan and the others, the day after Baron and Tomas rode on their own way, they had come on the still-smoking ruins of a farmhouse, he and the 15 lads with him then. After burying what they found in the ashes, it was easy enough to follow the Trollocs, between Gaul's tracking and his own nose. The sharp-fetid stink of the Trollocs had not had time to fade away, not to him. Some of the lads had grown hesitant when they realized he meant what he had said about hunting Trollocs. If they had had to go very far, he suspected most would have drifted away when no one was looking.
Hell yeah, Grandpa. You have a good night
The
too,
trail
bro.
led to a thicket no more than 3 miles off. The Trollocs had not bothered with sentries. They had no Myrddraal with them to overawe their laziness. And the Two Rivers men knew how to stalk silently. 32 Trollocs died, many in their filthy blankets, pierced through with arrows before they could raise a howl, much less sword or axe. Daniel and Ban and the others had been ready to celebrate a great triumph, until they found what was in the Trollocs' big iron cookpot sitting in the ashes of the fire. Most dashed away to throw up, and more than one wept openly. Perrin dug the grave himself. Only one. There was no way to tell what had belonged to whom. Cold as he felt inside, he was not sure he could have stood it himself, if there had been. Late the next day, no one hesitated when he picked up another fetid trail, though a few mutters wondered what he was following, until Gaul found the tracks of hooves and boots too big for men. Another thicket, close to the waterwood, held 41 Trollocs and a Fade, with sentries set, though most snored at their posts. It would have made no difference had they all been awake. Gaul killed those that were, sliding through the trees like a shadow, and the Two Rivers men were nearly 30 themselves by then. Besides, those who had not seen the cookpot had heard of it. They shouted as they shot, with a satisfaction not much less savage than the guttural Trolloc howls. The black-garbed Myrddraal had been last to die, a porcupine quilled with arrows. No one cared to recover a shaft from that, even after it finally stopped thrashing. That evening, the second rain came. Hours of drenching downpour, with a sky full of roiling black clouds and stabbing lightning. Perrin had not smelled Trolloc scent since, and the ground had been washed clean of tracks. Most of their time had been spent avoiding White Cloak patrols, which everyone said were more numerous than in the past. The farmers Perrin had spoken to said the patrols seemed more interested in finding their prisoners again and those who had broken them free than in looking for Trollocs. Quite a few of the men had gathered around Luke now. He was tall enough for his red gold hair to show above their darker heads. He seemed to be talking, and they listening and nodding. "Let's see what he has to say," Perrin said grimly. The Two Rivers men gave by yielding him with only a little prodding. They were all intent on the red-coated lord, who was indeed holding forth. "So the village is quite secure now. Plenty of people gathered together to defend it. I must say I enjoy sleeping under a roof when I can. Mistress Alvir at the inn provides a tasty meal. Her bread is among the best I have ever eaten. There truly is nothing like fresh-baked bread and fresh-churned butter, and putting your feet up of an evening with a fine mug of wine, or some of Master Alvir's good brown ale." "I was saying we should go to Women's Field, Perrin," Kenley said. With the back of a grimy hand. He was not the only one who had been as he would like, and not the only one coming down with a cold either. Luke smiled at Perrin, much the way he would have added to do a trick. The village is quite secure, but there is always a need for more strong backs. "We are hunting Trollocs," Perrin said coolly. "Not everyone has left their farms yet. Every band we find and kill means farms not burned and more people with a chance to reach safety." Will Alcine barked a laugh. He was not so pretty, with a red puffy nose and a spotty 6-day growth of hair. "We've not smelled a Trolloc in days. Be reasonable, Perrin. Maybe we've killed them all already." There were mutters of agreement. "I do not mean to spread dissension." Luke spread his hands guilelessly. "No doubt you have had many great successes beside those we have heard of. Hundreds of Trollocs killed, I expect. You may well have chased them all away. I can tell you Emond's Field is ready to give you all a hero's welcome. The same must be true at Watch Hill for those who live up that way. Any Devon riders?" Will nodded, and Luke clapped him on the shoulder with a hollow good fellowship. "A hero's welcome, without a doubt." Anyone who wants to go home can, Perrin said in a level voice. Fail directed a warning frown at him. This was no way to be a general. But he did not want anyone with him who did not want to be there. He did not want to be a general, for that matter. Myself, I don't think the job is done yet, but it is your choice. No one took him up, though Will at least looked ready to. But 20 more stared at the ground and scuffed their boots in last year's leaves. Well, Luke said casually, if you have no Trollocs left to chase, perhaps it is time to turn your attentions to the White Cloaks. They are not happy at you Two Rivers folk deciding to defend yourselves. And I understand they meant to hang the lot of you in particular as outlaws for stealing their prisoners. Anxious frowns passed between a good many of the Two Rivers lads. It was then that Gaul came pushing through the crowd, followed close by Bane and Jihad. Not that the Aiel had to push, of course. The men cleared aside as soon as they realized who it was. Luke frowned at Gaul thoughtfully, perhaps disapprovingly. The Aielmen stared back stony-faced. Will and Daniel and the others brightened at the sight of the Aiel. Most still believed hundreds more were hiding somewhere in the thickets and forests. They never questioned why all those Aiel stayed hidden, and Perrin certainly never brought it up. If believing in a few hundred Aiel reinforcements helped them keep their courage, well and good. What did you find? Perrin asked. Gaul had been gone since the day before. He could move as fast as a man on horseback, faster in woods, and he could see more. Trollocs, Gaul replied, as though reporting the presence of sheep, moving up through this well-named waterwood to the south. They number no more than 30, and I believe they mean to make camp on the edge of the forest and strike tonight. There are men still holding to the soil to the south. He gave a sudden wolfish grin. They did not see me. They will have no warning. Chiad leaned closer to Bane. He moves well enough for a stone dog, she whispered loudly enough to be heard 20 feet off. He makes little more noise than a lame bull. I will, Perrin said. You want to go to Emmons Field? You can shave and maybe find a girl to kiss while those Trollocs have supper tonight. Will flushed a dark red. I will be wherever you are tonight, Ibarra, he said in a hard voice. Nobody means to go home if there are Trollocs still about, Perrin, Henley added. Perrin looked around at the others, meeting only agreeing nods. What of you, Luke? We would be pleased to have a lord and hunter for the horn with us. You could show us how it is done. Luke smiled fractionally, a gash on stone that never came close to those cold blue eyes. I regret the defenses of Emmons Field still need me. I must see to protecting your people should the Trollocs come there in greater numbers than 30. Or the Children of the Light. My lady Faye. He held out a hand to his sister, mounting, but she shook her head. I will remain with Perrin, Lord Luke. Pity, he murmured, shrugging as if to say there was no accounting for women's taste. Tugging on his wolf-embroidered gauntlets, he swung into the black stallion's saddle smoothly. Good luck to you, Master Golden Eyes. I do hope you all have good luck. With a half bow to Fael, he whirled his tall horse showily and spurred him to a gallop that forced some of the men to leap out of his way. Fael frowned at Perrin in a manner that suggested a lecture on rudeness when they were alone. He listened to Luke's horse until he could hear it no more, then turned to Gaul. Can we get ahead of the Trollocs? Be waiting somewhere before they reach wherever they mean to stop. The distance is all right if we start now, Gaul said. They are moving in a straight line and not hurrying. There is a night runner with them. It will be easier surprising them in their blankets than facing them awake. He meant that the Two Rivers men might do better. There was no fear smell on him. There was certainly fear smell on some of the others, yet no one suggested that a confrontation with Trollocs up and alert, and a murder to boot, might not be the best plan. They broke camp as soon as he gave the order, dousing the fires and scattering the ashes, gathering their few pots and mounting their ill-assorted horses and ponies. With the sentries in, Perrin reminded himself to have that word with them, they numbered nearly 70, surely enough to ambush 30 Trollocs. Ban Alcine and Daniel each still led half. It seemed the way to keep arguments down. With Billy Aldai and Kenley and others each heading 10 or so. Will, too. He was not too bad a fellow, usually, when he could keep his mind off the girls. Fail rode Swallow close beside Stepper as they started south, with the Aiel running ahead. You truly do not trust him at all, she said. He is a dark friend. I trust you and my bow and my axe, he told her. Her face looked sad and pleased at the same time, but it was the simple truth. For 2 hours, Gaul led them south before turning into the Waterwood, a tangle of towering oak and pine and leatherleaf, bushy bay trees and cone-shaped red oil trees, tall round-topped ash and sweetberry and black willow, with thickets of vine-woven brush below. 1,000 squirrels chittered on the branches, and thrushes and finches and redwings darted everywhere. Perrin smelled deer and rabbits, too, and foxes. Tiny streams abounded, and rush-bordered pools and ponds dotted the forest, often shaded but sometimes open, from less than 10 paces across to a few almost 50. The ground seemed sodden after all the rain it had received, squelching under the horses' hooves. Between a large willow-ringed pond and a narrow rivulet a pace wide, perhaps 2 miles into the wood, Gaul halted. Here the Trollocs would come if they continued as they had been. The 3 Aiel melted into the trees to make sure of that and bring back warning of their approach. Leaving Fail and a dozen men to watch the horses, Perrin spread the others out in a narrow curve, a cup into which the Trollocs should march. After making certain each man was well hidden and knew what he was to do, he placed himself at the bottom of the cup, beside an oak with a trunk thicker than he was tall. Easing his axe in its belt loop, he knocked an arrow and waited. A light breeze blew in his face, swelling and falling. He should be able to find them long before they came in sight. They should be coming right at him. Touching the axe again, he waited. Minutes passed, an hour, more. How long before the shadow spawn appeared? Much longer in this dam, and bowstrings would need to be changed. The birds vanished a moment before the squirrels went silent. Perrin drew a deep breath and frowned. Nothing. On that breeze, he should surely be able to smell Trollocs as soon as the animals sensed them. A vagrant gust brought on a putrid stink, like centuries-old sweat and rot. Whirling, he shouted, "They're behind us! Rally to me! 2 Rivers to me!" Behind, the horses. "Fail!" Screams and shouts erupted from every side. Howls and savage cries. A ram-horned Trolloc leaped into the open 20 paces away, raising a long curved bow. Perrin drew fletchings to ear and fired in one smooth motion, reaching for another shaft as soon as his arrow cleared bow. His broadhead point took the Trolloc between its eyes. It bellowed once as it fell. And its arrow, the size of a small spear, took Perrin in the side like a hammer blow. Gasping with shock, he hunched over, dropping the bow and fresh arrow alike. Pain spread out in sheets from the black-fletched shaft. It quivered when he drew breath, and every quiver shot out new pain. 2 more Trollocs leaped over their dead companion, wolf-snout and goat horns, black-mailed shapes half again as tall as Perrin and twice as broad. Baying, they rushed at him, curved swords upraised. Forcing himself upright, he gritted his teeth and snapped the thumb-thick arrow off short, pulled his axe free and rushed to meet them. Howling, he realized dimly. Howling with rage that filmed his eyes red. They towered over him, their armor all spikes at elbows and shoulders, but he swung his axe in a frenzy as if trying to cut down a tree with every blow. For Adora, for Dazelle. My mother, he screamed. Burn you, my mother! Abruptly, he realized he was hacking at bloodied shapes on the ground. Growling, he made himself stop, shaking with the effort as much as with the pain in his side. There was less shouting now, fewer screams. Was anyone left but him? Rally to me! Two Rivers to me! Two Rivers! Someone shouted frantically, off through the damp woods, and then another. Two Rivers! Two. Only two. Fail! He cried. Go light, Fail! A flicker of black flowing through the trees announced a Myrddraal before he could see it clearly. Snake-like black armor down his chest, inky cloak hanging undisturbed by its running. As it came closer, it slowed to a sinuous, assured walk. It knew he was hurt, knew him for easy meat. Its pale-faced stare stabbed him with fear. Fail, it said mockingly. Its voice made the name sound like burned leather crumbling. Your Fail was delicious. Roaring, Perrin hurled himself at him. A black-bladed sword turned his first stroke, and his second, his third. The thing's slug-white face became fixed with concentration, but it moved like a viper, like lightning. For the moment, he had it on the defensive. For the moment. Blood trickled down his side. His side burned like a forge fire. He could not keep this up. And when his strength failed, that sword would find his heart. His foot slipped in the mud, churned up beneath his boots. The Fade's blade drew back, and a blurring sword half severed the eyeless head, so it fell over on one shoulder in a fountain of black blood. Stabbing blindly, the Myrddraal staggered forward, stumbling, refusing to die completely, still instinctively trying to kill. Perrin scrambled out of its path, but his attention was all for the man coolly wiping his blade with a fistful of leaves. Ivan's color-shifting cloak hung down his back. Elana sent me to find you. I almost didn't. The way you have been moving, but 70 horses do leave tracks. The dark, slender warder seemed as composed as if he were lighting his pipe before a fireplace. The Trollocs were not linked to that. He indicated the Myrddraal with his sword. It had fallen, but still stabbed randomly. More's the pity. But if you can gather your people together, they might not be willing to try you without one of the Faceless to goad them. I would estimate about 100 to begin. A few less now. You have bloodied them some. He began a calm survey of the shadows beneath the trees, only the blade in his hand indicating anything out of the ordinary. For a bare moment, Perrin gaped. Elana wanted him? She had sent Ivan? Just in time to save his life. Shaking himself, he raised his voice again. Two Rivers to me! For the love of the light, rally to me! Here! Rally here! This time he kept it up until familiar faces appeared, stumbling through the trees. Blood-streaked faces, often as not. Shocked, staring faces. Some men half supported others, and some had lost their bows. The Aiel were among them, apparently unhurt except that Gaul limped slightly. They did not come as we expected, was all the Aielmen said. The night was colder than we expected. There was more rain than we expected. That was how he said it. Fail seemed to materialize with the horses. With half the horses, including Stepper and Swallow, and 9 of the 12 men he had left with her. A scrape marred one cheek, but she was alive. He tried to hug her, but she pushed his arms away, muttering angrily over the broken-off arrow, even while she gently pulled his coat away from the thick shaft in an effort to examine where it had gone in. Perrin studied the men around him. They had stopped coming now. Yet there were faces missing. Kenley Ahan, Billy Aldai, Tevin Marwyn. He made himself name the missing, made himself count them. 27. 27 not there. Did you bring all the wounded? He asked dully. Is anybody left out there? Fail's hand trembled on his side. Her expression as she frowned at his wound was a blend of worry and fury. She had a right to be angry. He should never have gotten her into this. Only the dead, Van Alstyne said, in a voice as leaden as his face. Will looked to be frowning at something just out of sight. I saw Kenley, he said. His head was in the crook of an oak, but the rest of him was down at the foot. I saw him. His cold won't bother him now. He sneezed and looked startled. Perrin sighed heavily and wished he had not. Pain shooting up his side clenched his teeth. Fail, a green and gold silk scarf wadded in her hand, was trying to pull his shirt out of his breeches. He pushed her hands away despite her scowl. There was no time for tending wounds now. Wounded on the horses, he said when he could speak. Yvonne, will they attack us? The forest seemed too still. Yvonne. The warder appeared, leading a dark gray gelding with a fierce eye. Perrin repeated his question. Perhaps, perhaps not. On their own, Trollocs kill whomever is easiest. Without a halfman, they would probably rather find a farm than someone who might put arrows in them. Make sure everyone who can stand upright carries a bow with an arrow nocked, even if they cannot draw it. They may decide the price is too high for the fun. Perrin shivered. If the Trollocs did attack, they would have as much fun as a dance at Sunday. Yvonne and the Aiel were the only ones really ready to attack. And Fael. Her dark eyes shone with fury. He had to get her to safety. The warder did not offer his own horse for the wounded, which made sense. The animal was not likely to let anyone else on its back. A war-trained horse with its master in the saddle would be a formidable weapon if the Trollocs came again. Perrin tried to put Fael up on Swallow, but she stopped him. The wounded, you said, she told him softly. Remember? To his disgust, she insisted he ride Stepper. He expected the others to protest after he had brought them to disaster, but no one did. There were just enough horses for those who could not walk, and those unable to walk far. Grudgingly, he admitted that he was one of the latter. So he ended up in his saddle. Half the other riders had to cling to theirs. He sat upright, gritting his teeth to do it. Those who walked or stumbled, and some who rode, clutched their bows as if they meant salvation. Perrin carried one too, and so did Fael, though he doubted she could even draw a 2 Rivers longbow. It was appearance that counted now, illusion that might see them safe. Like Yvonne, alert as a coiled whip, the 3 Aiel looked unchanged as they glided ahead, spears stuck through the harness of the bow cases on their backs, horn bows in hand and ready. The rest, including himself, were a ragbag remnant, nothing like the band he had led here, so confident and full of his own pride. Yet illusion worked as well as reality. For the first mile through the tangle, vagrant breezes brought in Trolloc stink, the scent of Trolloc's shadows stalking. Then the stench slowly faded and vanished as the Trollocs fell behind, diluted by mirage. Fael walked beside Stepper, one hand on Perrin's leg as though she meant to hold him up. Now and then she looked up at him, smiling encouragingly, but with worry creasing her forehead. He smiled back as best he could, trying to make her think he was all right. 27. He could not stop the names from running through his head. Kali Garin, Jared Adair, Dale Eltarin, and Ren Chandin. 27 Two Rivers folk he had killed with his stupidity. 27. They took the most direct route back out of the Waterwood, breaking clear sometime in the afternoon. It was hard to tell exactly how late, with the sky still blanketed in gray and everything blandly shadowed. High grass pasture dotted with trees stretched in front of them, and some scattered sheep and a few farmhouses in the distance. No smoke rose from any of the chimneys. If there was anyone in those houses, something hot would have been cooking in the fireplace. The nearest rising smoke plume looked 5 miles off at least. We should find a farm for the night, Ebon said. Someplace under cover in case it rains again. Fire. Food. He looked at the 2 Rivers men and added, water and bandages. Baron only nodded. The water was better than he had, knowing the right thing to do. Old Billy Conger, with his head full of ale, was probably better. He just let Stepper follow Ebon's gray. Before they had gone much beyond a mile, a faint thread of music caught Perrin's ear. Fiddles and flutes playing merry tunes. At first he thought he was dreaming, but then the others heard too, exchanging incredulous looks, then relieved grins. Music meant people, and happy people by the sound, someone celebrating. That anyone might have something to celebrate was enough to pick their feet up somewhat. Chapter 41. Among the Tuatha.
Stop it there for tonight. Alright, everyone, probably gonna call it into this live for right now. Definitely appreciate everyone stopping by and everyone keeps coming back and chilling with me. Definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Till next time, everyone, y'all stay safe out there.